Thank you. It appears that the recording has started again. I do apologise, Mr. Gregory. I'm not quite sure whereabouts through your reply to Mark Whittington you got, but please carry on.
Okay, I will, thank you. In terms of the question I was answering from Councillor Mark Whittington, I think I was answering the second part of it, which was about our reliance on internal audit. And what I was saying was that auditing standards don't allow us to rely directly on internal audits work for substantive assurance. So what we do is we see internal audit as part of your sort of overall control environment. So if they are doing a satisfactory job, or even better than a satisfactory job, then that would reduce the overall level of risk that we see in your operations, which obviously then feeds through into the amount of work that we have to do. But it doesn't directly mean, so if internal audit do some testing on payroll or something, that doesn't mean that we don't also have to do our own testing of payroll. It's one of the things that there used to be this concept of the managed audit where we worked very much jointly with internal audit, but that is no longer allowed through auditing standards. I hope that answers the question, Councillor Whittington, after that strategic pause in the middle.
Thanks, John, it does. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Paul Wood.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a question for you, John, that for explanation, really. I can't quite understand it. I think it's just an explanation I need. It's on the land and buildings, where there's been a sort of recalculation of the depreciation charges resulted in underestimated values, and that's further explained on Appendix A.
Yes.
But I couldn't quite see if it's, I think it's my misunderstanding of it, is if it's an understated value, obviously the values then increase, but why is in Appendix A, it shows a £300,000 surplus on expenditure. I couldn't quite relate the two. If it's underestimated, is that £300,000 surplus we've got, or is it the £300,000 increase in value of the assets?
What basically the value of the assets feeds through into your income and expenditure accounts through depreciation. So that's effectively the charge that the income and expenditure accounts include to sort of recognise the consumption of value, if you like, from those assets. And what we're saying here is that both because of the change in the year and cumulatively, it's actually reduced the amount of depreciation that has been charged in the year by that figure. I think I'm getting that the right way around. I mean, I'm sure that Alison, if she's on the call, might well be able to explain it better than I can, because I know she's the one who's had to work through it all. But
yes, it's the reversal of the depreciation goes against the revaluation reserve, so it's not an actual. It's not a surplus. It's just a recognition against the revaluation reserve. It's where it's written off against in the bottom half of the comprehensive income and expenditure statement.
So, am I correct in thinking the value's gone up by 300,000?
Well, the values have gone up by the reversal of the depreciation, so it's actually the values have gone up by, it's included on table in the financial reports covering report, which is the next on the agenda. They've gone up by about £7 million, but it's just how we have to reverse it all out through different unusable reserves. I can provide a better detail in writing, more detail in writing, if that would help.
Yeah, I must admit I don't quite understand it, so maybe just drop me an email, Alison.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Aye. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Philip Knowles, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was on about the same thing, trying to understand the 300,000. So if you've got an explanation, you can send it to me as well, please. And remember, I'm not an accountant, unlike Mark and one or two other people. I'm just a layman, and a stupid layman at that. But the other question is, the debit of MIRS is 300. The credit, the corresponding credit, is split into two areas. One on non-recurrent assets as the surplus, and another are cost of services. I wonder if the cost of services was a direct change in the accounts rather than so on. But by all means, if you want to answer that by a note, I'm happy to listen to that. But I didn't quite understand why that should be.
The cost of service has when there's not a revaluation reserve, the cost of service is amended by any revaluation losses, but these are then reversed out through the movement in reserve statement so that it doesn't impact on the council taxpayer.
Okay.
I'm afraid this whole area of the accounts is very much in the depths of the dark arts that are local authority accounts, and even somebody who is an accountant working in the commercial sector may struggle with this particular issue.
Happy to continue to struggle, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. I have had a query from Councillor Johnson about what is the final bill for the audit, Mr. Gregory. I thought we said it was 50,000 something, but
50. The rough figure I've come up with is 53,485.
Yeah, I got that. Sorry, I'm interrupting now. I got that. But what about this 18,000 on that other page? Does that come later, or is that part of that 53,000?
No, that's not part of the 53,000. The 5,000. The 5,000 for CFO Insights, I suspect, has already been paid, and then we will bill for the other two elements: the housing benefit grant claim and the housing capital receipts grant claim. Once the work has been done.
That's 53 plus that then, which is 9,000, is it?
That's potentially another 13,000.
So that makes it 66,000 then.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. That's just what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you for that. There are no more speakers, so we like to thank the auditors for their findings, and thankfully I think the accounts department do a big vote of thanks for getting that very clean report, which I think they must have worked very hard in these austere times to get that. We'll now move on to item 6. It's the statement of accounts. Now, I think Alison's doing this, aren't you, again? Because you worked it all out.
I'm just going to introduce the report, Mr. Chairman, and I'm going to hand over to Alison if that's okay.
No, you said that Alison was doing it. Go on then, Richard.
Some hours have passed since then, Mr. Chairman. And just to carry on your theme, I'd like to thank Alison and the team for the accounts. As you've identified, it's been a particularly challenging period, although there's been obviously an extension to the statutory timetable. I think both from the audit side and both from the finance side, it's been a very difficult process to undertake this year, not helped by the restrictions on people being able to work together as a team to do this, but also in terms of the other areas of work the finance has been working throughout this whole period in terms of the amended budget, the budget COVID impact reports that have been provided to members, and also the increase in the statutory returns that have been undertaken on behalf of government during this period. So it's been a very challenging period with fixed resources to do that. So we are all collectively very pleased with the outcome. And as Councillor Stokes said in his introduction, it's a very unfortunate reality that a lot of the paperwork has had to come out late. That's through nobody's fault as such. It's just the reality of the position that we find ourselves in. Every day of the extended statutory timetable has been taken up from both audit and ourselves to make sure the accounts are fair and transparent and fully compliant. But members will be reminded that the draft accounts were presented to them on the 28th of August. So the statements in the main are exactly the same as the committee saw some weeks ago. Since that period, we've had the public notice period, which is a statutory requirement, and that opened on the 1st September and ran until the 12th of October. And we had no direct approaches by members of the public or any other parties to inspect the accounts and the information that underpins the account. So that period has since closed. Also within the pack today is the annual governance statement as well, which is the Council's transparent, open and transparent overview of the governance arrangements, and that is for the year 1920. So more recent observations around governance won't be featuring in this statement, but will clearly feature in the 2021 statement. And it's important to note that within that annual governance statement, there is a action plan that's been agreed by officers for your perusal this afternoon, which again will be monitoring and reporting on as we go through this financial year. As mentioned by John, there are probably just a couple of key significant changes to the accounts since the draft ones were presented, and I'll just ask Alison just to provide a bit more of an overview of what those changes are, so that members can be fully familiarised with the changes since the draft set in August and the accounts being presented this afternoon. Thank you, Ms. Chairman.
Thank you. As highlighted by Audit in their report, the value of property, plant and equipment in the balance sheet has been amended to reverse the in-year depreciation charge. Members will note on page 4 of the accounts, which is page 56 of your pack, that we've included a third balance sheet as at the 1st of April 2018, which basically restates all of the valuation figures to then enable us to produce the restated balance sheet for 2018-19 and the balance sheet for 2019-20. The value of property assets have increased so that the net book value included in the accounts is consistent with the external valuer's report at the 31st of March. And these amendments have been reflected in note 19 of page 26 of the accounts, page 78 of your pack. These amendments then are offset against unusable reserves. So the unusable reserves detailed on note 36, the capital adjustment account and revaluation reserve have been amended to reverse out these changes. There was then the value of an asset included in other land and buildings had been overstated by £250,000 as an incorrect area had been provided to the external valuers. So the value of property, plant and equipment and the revaluation reserve have been amended to reflect this change. The amendments to the balance sheet between the draft and final accounts are included at table 1 of the covering report, and then there are also the notes that go alongside the balance sheet, and the comprehensive income and expenditure statement have been also amended to reflect these changes, and those are reflected in table 2. The other major change in the accounts was to the 2018-19 comprehensive income and expenditure statement, which is on page 2 of the statement of accounts, page 54 in your pack. The figures have been restated to reverse the allocation of support service charges, which is to enable comparisons to be made between 2018-19 and 2019-20. As support service charges are no longer reallocated out, they remain within the service area that they're incurred, as this then allows comparisons to be made between the statement of accounts and the budget monitoring reports, which are produced throughout the year, which is recommended by SIPFA. The changes to the comprehensive income and expenditure statement have been detailed in table 3 of the covering report. Members will note that the total between the draft and final figures for 2018-19 and 2019-20 have been been amended, and that's to reflect the revaluation losses associated with the reversal of the in-year depreciation, which has been charged to the growth service area. There were also some minor wording changes to notes 3 and 4 recommended by Audit, mainly to reflect the impact that COVID is obviously having. And then there was one note, the debtors note, which is it should say note 28 in the report on page 41 of the accounts. A government debtor for £2 million had been incorrectly recorded against other entities, and that should have actually been recorded against government debtors, but this doesn't impact on the overall total of the table. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Alison, for that comprehensive report, and I don't know quite how you've done all that work in such a short length of time. It's tremendous, and the explanation as well. Councillor Mark Whittington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to I could probably extend the comments that both Richard and the Chairman have made, Alison, to you and your team. Really, all I wanted to say is I found the report, obviously we've been through the draft reports. I found them, obviously, I suppose it's easy for me to say that I found them fairly easy to follow. But I just want to thank you and your team for all your hard work. I'm just wondering, Mr. Chairman, if we as a committee could find some way of expressing maybe a note in writing of our thanks and appreciation to everybody involved, because it has been a very difficult time. That's really all I have to say, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I think that could be suitably arranged, Mark, and should be. I approve of that. Paul Wood, please.
Yeah, thanks again, Mr. Chairman, and yeah, I'd also add my thanks to the accounts team. Yeah, they've done a wonderful job in getting all the accounts out. Yeah, because it's comprehensive accounts, and it must be difficult to get it out in the circumstances. Got a couple of comments. I was pleased to see on page, well, it's 72 of our pack, page 20, termination benefits. That termination benefits for 1920 only 390,000 have gone down from the previous year. There were 905,000, which is pretty unacceptable, to be quite honest. But I know the accounts are just reporting the figures, so pleased that that's gone down. I'd also make a comment, and I can't quite see it on the report. Pension scheme and pension benefits on page 98 of our report. Well, page 46 of your report, 98 of our scheme. What percentage do we actually have to pay, and is it being adjusted for future years? I mean, what percentage did we pay in this year? The report of the accounts, our contribution. Obviously, it's calculated triannually and things. And I know Mark should know this because he's on Links County Council's pension committee, aren't you, Mark?
I'm on the pension board, and our role on the board is to keep an eye on the committee. So it is a bit of a governance and scrutiny role.
Yeah, but I wonder what we have a contribution that we have to make, and that's not mentioned in the report, I don't think, is it, Alison?
The contribution rate in 2019-20 was 16.5%, I believe, and in the current financial year is 17.5%. We also make a contribution to the pension deficit, but I'd have to confirm what that figure is. So I haven't got it in hand.
Yeah, I just wanted that idea. That's fine, Alison. Yeah. I say you've all done a great job on it. Thanks. That's fine.
There appears to be no more speakers on this item, and from the chair, I'd like to move the recommendations on page 33 of our report to approve the 1920 statement of accounts, note the outcome of the audit work, and approve that a letter of representation be signed by management. Have I a seconder for that?
Yeah, I'll second that, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Paul Wood, yes.
Thank you. Can we go to the vote? Anybody that wants to vote against this recommendation, would they do so in the chat box? Before we do that, has this got to be a recorded vote, or can we do it by exception?
Chairman?
Yes?
Chairman, it's Cam Bradford here. It doesn't have to be a recorded vote unless you were requesting a recorded vote. That's up to you. But if you're seeking by exception people to against the report, you should also be seeking if people would like to abstain as well.
Yes, I did forget to mention that because I know that one of them wasn't at the August meeting. So if there's any against or abstain, would they please indicate in the chat box, please? Everyone seems to be happy, so we'll assume that that recommendation is carried. Thank you. Now move to agenda item 7, the strategic risk register, which I think is going to be done by Richard Wiles.
It is, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Members will recall that the strategic risk register is a relatively new format for our then called corporate risk register, and we spent a couple of meetings developing how we can have a more thematic approach to strategic risks. And as a previous meeting in June, we mapped across the then corporate risks onto this strategic risk register, which basically overlays a more thematic approach in which corporate risks can be identified and allocated across those themes as necessary. We also, if members recall, spent some time discussing risk appetite and what the authority's exposure was and what the authority's appetite was, particularly for different types of risks, and they in the Appendix A are categorised above each of the headings. The outcome of the work we've done as a committee is that we've now got 6 thematic risks which are listed out in the appendices, and alongside each of those thematic risks we've detailed our risk appetite against each one, which range from complete aversion to hungry, depending on the risk type. And that's listed at the back of the appendices, depending on the appetite at that time. And it's important to note that those appetites may change as the authority develops its thinking, particularly around the corporate plan and its ambitions going forward. So there's a range of different approaches we've taken. So that's the iteration of the risk register following that work. What we now need to do with the committee is move this risk register on to its next stage, which is residual scoring of those risks. So we've got listed out there for members the existing controls that are in place against each of those risks, and the actions that are to be taken to either expand or enhance or introduce new controls. So very much a work in progress, but very much a live document. So once those controls are embedded and reviewed, we can then develop a residual score for each of those risks. And more importantly, from the committee's point of view, we can assign owners of those controls and monitor and track the implementation of those controls where possible. Clearly, some of those will be existing and embedded, and it's a case of monitoring their effectiveness, but also some of them will be, particularly on the right-hand column, new controls that need to be introduced. So my recommendation is that we bring the outcome of that work that we'll be doing in the interim period back to the committee at their 4th of February meeting to pick up the discussion with the members to take the register on to its next stage. What we've also done during this time is bring this register up to date with the more significant risks that have now been identified through the housing internal audit report that the committee discussed at its 19th of November meeting, and that very much sits under risk category 3, which is around the internal control framework, and you can see under the narrative on the left hand side some of the issues and theoretical risks obviously come to bear through the weaknesses identified through that review, particularly around reputational damage, potential for harm, and also regulatory non-compliance. So it very much sits under that risk, and you'll see under 3.1 we've picked up those particular actions, and you'll know as a subset of that there is an action plan developed or being developed under that heading, and the committee again were given information at the last meeting about the implementation timeline for those actions. So you can see, and hopefully it demonstrates that this document is becoming more and more fit for purpose, but more importantly it needs to be a living and breathing document that members feel comfortable accurately reflects the authority, but more importantly assesses and tests the effectiveness of the controls that are being put in place and also being proposed to be developed over the coming weeks and months. So our intention after the February meeting is to keep this on a 6th monthly agenda item for the committee. Clearly if the committee needs it more sooner than that, then that can be arranged as well. But in a normal steady state, we would anticipate bringing this back to you on a 6th monthly basis to track and monitor the implementation, and also to periodically assess those thematic headings and risk appetite bandings to see whether or not they maintain and are staying fit for purpose at that period in time. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Mark Whittington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Richard, thanks very much for this document. It's a great leap forward, actually. I'm really appreciative of seeing it. It's like a fair amount of work gone into it. I'm particularly pleased that, you know, as you say, it's an iterative living document, and you're referring in all the sections to the current circumstances and the way in which things are changing, which is fantastic. Obviously, you mentioned that when the report comes back to us in February, you're going to have the residual risk scores worked out. I'd quite like when that comes, if we could see what the methodology behind it is, because I know that I've used in the past a performance matrix where you kind of weight things out and then work out what the overall final risk is. So just seeing that would be useful. In terms of the action owners and dates, is that proposed to come to us in February, or would that be later? Because obviously at some point, you know, this is going to develop up into an action and monitoring plan. And when it does, what methodology are we do you envisage us using for that? Are we going to use a traditional RAG rating or something else? Because I sometimes find with RAG ratings, you can be red, amber or green, but it doesn't necessarily tell you the direction of travel of something. You know, something may be a red, but actually it may just be below an amber. You know what I mean? And it might have improved since last time. Alternatively, something might be a green, but it might be going in the wrong way now, on the border of amber, if that makes sense. I'm just wondering if when we do work this out, whatever methodology we use, we can, as well as understanding the overall level of risk where we are, we could also have some indicator of the direction of travel, if that would be possible going forward. But apart from that, I think it's a really positive document, and hopefully in February we'll have a bit more information behind it. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you, Richard. Mark. There are no more speakers, so it falls to me to propose the recommendations at the bottom of page 3 of the report. Have I a seconder for this?
I'll be happy to second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mark. We'll go to the vote, and if there are anybody against or abstain, if they'd like to put it in the message box. Other than that, we'll assume that everybody's in favour. Right, there appears to be no objections to that, so that is carried unanimously. We'll now move on to agenda item 9, delivering good governance, the external review. I understand that Karen is going to attend to this on our behalf.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully I'm able to. This was, of course, to review the report, as report covers, that was taken place last year. That's in 2019. The information in front of you today has got the detailed report that was received from Charlie Aden, who undertook the report, and her key recommendations that came out of, that's attached as Appendix A of the report. I would just like to stress with members, as part of this, of course, we took this on board when we're developing out the corporate plan. You would actually see reference to it in the corporate plan. However, there's areas of the document that still need addressing. And of course, this report comes to you today as it is a governance review by an external person, and it's most appropriate that it's presented to you today, Chairman. And myself and Shaheen and Richard are here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any committee members requiring to speak on this? Will they? Councillor Paul Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'd almost asked me to speak before I typed in speak, please. Thank you for the. I mean, I was quite keen that this report came to the committee, and I'm pleased that it has. Governance is important, as well as the audit side of things. I was pleased with the report. I know Charlie Aden, who wrote the report. She used to work for South Stephen District Council some time ago, when I did. And I think she did a good report. I'm also very pleased that our Chief Exec, Karen, has took it on board very well and has produced on Appendix B a response to it and comments and completion dates. And I think that's very satisfactory as well, really. So I've really no further comments on it. Pleased that we've got the report, pleased that we're taking action on it, pleased that the Chief Exec is taking it very seriously, along with all their other duties, and has implemented it correctly. So well done and thank you.
Councillor Mark Whittington, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'd just like to really emphasise the comments that Councillor Wood has just made. Actually, I noticed on some of it there's some potential sort of links into some of the stuff the Constitution Committee is doing as part of its Constitution review. And I'm just wondering if Karen could provide us with some detail of how it's proposed that this report would be sort of would be linked in to the Constitution Committee's work plan on this. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Karen, you reply to that.
Thank you, Chairman. And I know Shaheen's on the call, and both of us together have been working considerably on this report. As Councillor Wood referred to on Appendix B, we've tried to give a bit of progress as part of the implementation plan. But as Councillor Whittington is right, there's although we've done Articles 1 to 4 of the Constitution review at the moment, there's many more articles and processes and procedures and rules of debate still to continue. Some areas like the annual governance statement, of course, that you've had on your agenda, were reviewed by myself and by Richard. So this piece of the work have been undertaken. As for the work programme for the Constitution, of course, there's parts of this review have picked up a number of critical areas that need to be put forward to the Constitution Committee. Shaheen will be doing that as the lead officer for the Constitution review, and of course that then goes through the Constitution Working Group, through the committee, and then the committee makes formal recommendations to full council. So there is a good golden thread from the items raised in this report through to the work and the work plan that's going forward at the present time. I think that there is a Constitution Committee meeting on Monday, and I think the council, if I can remember right on the agenda, the council put the next part, which is the council function and areas, is on that agenda. So we are moving on to the next section in the Constitution for the review.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you.
Councillor Philip Knowles, please.
Thank you, Karen. I think it's an excellent piece of work that we're undertaking, and I'm very pleased that we've got timetable for achieving some of those things, and I wish Karen and her staff well in developing this. Can I just ask that when there are major changes or major reports on the Constitution, we don't try and field them in about item 9 of a full council meeting, so they turn up at 10 to 4 when we've had a half a day's notice of them? Can we have plenty notice of what we're discussing? Then we can look at changing the Constitution in detail as a group of people, rather than have to rush it through on a day when it was inappropriate to do so. So that we have a day to look at constitutional changes if they are substantial on their own, perhaps before as an exceptional meeting, or before they go to a normal council meeting. Thank you.
Would you like to answer that, Karen?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. If I can, of course, it would be really good if through the Constitution Committee we have clarity around when each article is being reviewed and when it will be coming through to Council. And with any constitution, it should be a live document, as I call it. And I think at previous councils where I've worked, we've had regular refreshers of different pieces of the Constitution. The huge piece of work that you've got on at the moment is a fundamental review of your Constitution, which I think is critical. But I take your point on board, Councillor Knowles. It is critical for us to get the fundamental framework of how we operate in governance terms for the council in the right place. I think the other thing that we took from the last meeting of the articles of 1 to 4 that was presented was the presentation of the changes. I think it was quite difficult to read across with all the strikeouts and the adding in of words. So I know this is a piece of work that Sheen is looking at to make sure that the presentation of the changes is in the best way to assist members with their understanding.
Thank you, Karen. Mark, I understand you want to come back. I presume it's to do with the Constitution matter.
It is, Chair, thanks. As a member of the Constitution Committee, one of the problems we had, or one of the discussions we had, was obviously we knew we had to take the Constitution back to full council, and we were faced with the dilemma of, do we take it back in smaller chunks, or do we wait until the whole document is completed and then take it back? But it might become so unwieldy that it's very, very difficult to follow. So we decided upon to take back almost the progress report of the first 4 articles that we looked at. Unfortunately, as members picked up at the full council meeting, there was stuff that we were planning to move and change that actually would have been picked up in the rest of it. So I think that caused some confusion, and also I don't think as Karen's mentioned, the strikeouts didn't help. We were trying to help full council to understand the progress that we'd made so far, but I think in trying to provide you with a bite-sized piece of it, we probably completely confused everybody, and it certainly wasn't our intention to do that or to cover anything up. So I think next time we may simply have to wait until the whole document is done and then bring it back. But as part of that, one suggestion I have made to the chairman is that if we are referring specifically to external guidance, whether it's an act of parliament or auditing standards or whatever, that we provide a link through so members can click on the link and say, this is not us, Constitution Committee, saying we have to do this. This is an act of parliament or regulation or something. So members can follow their way through that. but also very much to, and also perhaps trying to put in a proper appendix where we identify lots of terms and actually have a section to cross-reference stuff back in it as well, so members can actually read it and follow it. It just means then that you may have to wait a bit longer to see the final report. But I'm just wondering, and I might suggest this to Councillor Linda Wootton, who's the chair of this, that maybe once we've actually got the final document, or as near final as we can, then maybe before it gets to full council, just wondering, Karen, and I don't know if the leader's in on this as well, possibly having some member workshops around the final document so we can explain it in a more slightly informal setting as to what we're proposing to do and why, so that when it goes to full council, more members have actually had a chance to have a sight of it. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Karen.
I don't think you want to come back on that, Karen, do you?
I think, Chairman, if you don't mind, I think it's a conversation that Constitution Committee need to have. I know they've got some workshops. They have a workshop before the meeting, so they have the roundtable workshop, and then that workshop information, how they've explored it, then gets reported to the committee, and then of course the committee on to council. I think it's quite right that the committee went forward with bite-sized chunks, because to review a whole constitution, have a whole constitution on an agenda would be, I think would certainly be longer than our 3 hours or 4 or 5 hours. I think it's fair to say. I think it's taken me longer than that to actually get through it myself. And that's just reading it, not just debating it. So I think it would be good that there'll be a good, clear recommendation and a timeline that comes out of the next Constitution Committee. And I'm sure Mark will be able to, Councillor Whittingham will be able to work with Councillor Wootton on that one.
Thank you. I believe Philip Knowles would like to reply to some point.
Yes, just thank you for Karen and Mark's comments. It's not the bite size. I was quite happy with that. But the last time we got about 24 hours notice to do a fait accompli in the middle of a meeting that was already running very late. We bring it on at 5 to 6 and say we've got to finish it by 6 next time. That was the disappointing thing, that we didn't have a chance really to look at some of the implications of consideration. So that's it. I'm very happy that you recognise that was a problem, and that you can help us next time with other forms of looking at it and discussing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Jackie Smith, been patiently waiting to speak.
Yes, I was going to raise what Philip was just enlightened us on. I was chairman when it was the last major event on the Constitution, and it was a nightmare. I thoroughly agree that we need to have a good part of the document, which is the proposal, so that we've got time to study it at leisure and go back with it and with any suggested improvements, alterations, call it what you like, because if you're going to do a job, do it properly, and just having a couple of hours or 3 hours to talk about something that's perhaps taken 3 months to put together, I think trying to assess it and approve it in a short time is just not sensible at all. So I really do hope we can have the time as Philip has suggested, because I'll give that my support.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm sure that Karen has noted that. Now, we've got no further speakers from the committee, so I'll go outside the committee. Councillor Phil Delks, please.
You're very kind, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. If I could just say on that point, I note, if I may, on the amendments to the Constitution, I won't take your time, but just to say, to highlight the remark made during that debate by the former leader of the council, who regretted that there was no support across the whole chamber for those changes that were being recommended. That was part of the problem. There just hadn't been the time, as colleagues have said. It was also, I think it was 40 pages that came before us, printed in red ink, in tiny writing. I think it was about 8.6, 7, 8. It was very tight. I couldn't read it. And I think the chairman of the Constitution Committee actually apologised for it looking like, I think she said, a failed calculus exam paper. So if lessons have been learned, that's really helpful. Thank you. Moving on to this report, my question, I'm actually quite shocked that a member of the committee hasn't asked the question that I'm about to ask, and it is noting that the report that you are considering is dated December 2019, a year ago, almost a year ago, except for about 2 weeks, I think. And so I'm really sort of asking, why has it not come before a committee during that time? We heard earlier in the meeting about how dedicated we are to openness and transparency. I'm not sure this says much for openness and transparency. We had the report last week on the Riverside that was dated in March that first came to a committee a week or two ago. And so my question isn't just sort of, why did it not come before? But also my question is, why has it come now? What's prompted it to come now? Thank you.
Karen, I'm sure you'll have due regard to the question.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I completely understand Councillor Delks' frustration with this. It was raised with me probably April time in the year this year that this report which predates me, had been received. I can't comment on why it hadn't come before then, but I think it was in draft form until into the year. We then were in COVID, so we weren't having any meetings. We came out of the first emergency part of COVID in June 21. The report was shared, I can't remember the date now, with the chairman and the vice chairman of Audit and Governance to make them aware. Councillor Wood was I think you were interviewed, weren't you, as part of the piece of work that Charlie undertook. So you'd been asking for a copy, so we made sure that was shared with the chairman and vice chairman of Audit and Governance. And bringing it forward, we wanted to put this on the agenda earlier, but your agendas have been extremely heavy. Certainly the last one was overtaken by housing. The previous one by there was some other key audits. So it's been bumped along a little bit, but the important thing is that we looked at a number of the 17 key recommendations of the report and have been, as you can see, been responding to them, and also they've been part of the development of the corporate plan through this time as well. So it's not just been set on a shelf, it's not been gathering dust, it's being worked on. We have shared it, although the sharing was to only a limited number, but it's been important that it's come to the earliest possible Audits and Governance and Audits Committee.
Thank you for the reply, Karen. Thank you for the information. And of course, we have a new chief executive, and I perhaps don't even need to ask you that when a report comes in future, I'm sure that you'll be making sure that it comes to a committee, the appropriate committee, at the earliest possible time. What I don't like, and I'm sure other councillors may share, is when we get a sometimes difficult report, it is not good enough to wait until we've got an action programme in line, and that you can come to, or not you, Karen, but that the colleagues can come to us with a nice action plan and a tick box and say, look, we've done this, we've done that, so the report's no longer relevant. That's the stuff. If I could just ask one very small supplementary, Chairman, to it. I notice I noticed that Councillor Wood, you mentioned, was interviewed. In paragraph 2.1, Charlie Adan does talk about, said that she spoke to councillors. Which other councillors were involved, and how many? Or that's perhaps the easiest way of asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have that detail of that. I've just taken it as I have assumed the leader of the cabinet, some cabinet members, but I don't know the detail of that one, Councillor Delks. I can try and find out, unless Shaheen knows the details of that one, or Richard, who are also on the call today.
Chairman, if I can come in, all we have is what Charlie has put in her report, and in Appendix A, she says interviews have taken place with a sample of senior officers and councillors on a Chatham House basis, which is why she hasn't, I think, included any notes of interviews with individuals. She just wanted to get, I think, a cross-party, cross the officer member spectrum views, and she didn't particularly want to comment because they were really to inform her judgments about what was happening in the council.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the answers. I've got to say it would have been helpful if we knew whether it was 2 councillors or 22. Thank you.
Right, we've only got one more speakers to hand. Councillor Ashley Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I agree with some of what has been said, particularly the question about why it's taken so long to get here. And I appreciate that Karen Bradford walked into a difficult situation, or it became difficult as soon as she arrived. And don't blame yourself, Karen, you can't help a global pandemic. However, in terms of the culture of the organisation, I think a lot of the problems still are there, and I think it boils down, and I'm sorry to I know we should all be singing Kumbaya, but I'm not going to. In the main report, Charlie Aiden says leadership at its simplest is the art of motivating a group of individuals to deliver a common goal or purpose. I don't think that we as a council are motivated towards a common goal or purpose. Secondly, she says that leaders have to work hard to understand how to create a more constructive culture, and that leads into Appendix B, where item 5 says about the art of constructive challenge. I often challenge things, hopefully mostly constructively, and I don't feel that my challenges are welcomed at all. Not at scrutiny, not at council, not usually at individual members. And I think that's the culture that has to change. It's not just changing the whole senior team. I welcome the new corporate plan, but it's not just about writing a corporate plan or changing the senior team of officers. The attitude has to change among the cabinet members. And if I might just finish off with point 17, there's an awful lot of things on this action list, by the way, which are not just work in progress, but no progress to date. But item 17 says that the council keeps its processes for reporting under review to ensure openness, transparency, accountability and accurate assessment of custom and practice across the council. That simply is not happening. And as we've seen earlier this meeting, when councillors are still trying to have private meetings with only limited to the planning committee with nobody else invited, that's again a typical example of a lack of accountability and transparency. And at last week's council meeting, having not just the land acquisition item submitted at the last minute, but also the change of directors on the Leisure SK, and also the closed shop of directorships on all the council committees, I don't think there is any commitment from the leadership. Plenty of words, but no commitment or action to create an attitude of openness, transparency and accountability.
Well, I won't agree with that, and I think a lot of your comments were totally irrelevant and weren't appropriate to what we're discussing this afternoon.
Well, you would say that, wouldn't you?
Well, of course I would. I'm the chairman.
Yeah, because
I'm allowed to.
Because you're the Conservative and you're doing as you're told.
Oh, put your microphone off, Councillor Baxter. I'm having no more of that.
Censorship. You don't like anything you don't agree with.
Chairman, can I just come back on some of the comments that Councillor Baxter has raised, please, that I'm able to, which are, shall we say, non-political, because, of course, I'm not able to comment on that. It's probably disappointing, Councillor Baxter, that you refer to Appendix B, that there's quite a number, I think you said there, about that there's no progress been made. I think there's 4 that there's been out of the 17 were at the present time that there's no progress been made. A number of them have had considerable progress made, and officers, you know, I want to stress to the committee how hard officers are working at the moment. They're working extremely hard. We're in a lockdown situation. People's well-being needs to be at the forefront of what we're doing at the moment, and people's well-being is being really affected by our working arrangements, how virtual meetings are working, how we are dealing with levels of frustration that we've not ever experienced before. That's in our own social situations, in our working environments. There are cultural issues, without a doubt, in this organisation. With my officers, I'm not here to talk about politics, but with the officers of the council. And, you know, you have my utmost commitment to address those cultural issues. But we all need to ensure that we all support each other through this very, very difficult time. My officers are working tirelessly. I've got Democratic Services officers working late at night time doing minutes. We are trying to keep, you know, the wheels in motion. A lot of councils have just shut down through this period of time. They're not having council meetings. They're not having meetings of council and scrutiny committees. We have given our utmost to try and keep all this working. And, you know, I think, you know, we try to be as open and transparent, so putting these reports on, moving things forward, doing reviews, turning things over and finding that where we've got to further improve. And, you know, I think as long as we all keep treating each other with respect and controlling our emotions, I think we'll all be in a positive place when we come out of this very, very unprecedented times. I don't think I ought to say any more, Chairman.
Thank you. Philip Knowles, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am non-political in any way. I'm not a member of any political party, and I don't perceive myself to be opposition. I perceive myself to be an independent member. I think then that you as chairman have every right to rule. You are chair. But in terms of what Councillor Baxter was saying there, he was referring to a specific document and specific parts of the document. And although you might not agree with what he says, you are the independent chair of this meeting, but he was talking to the papers in front of us. He was talking to Appendix B and picking out particular items on Appendix B, and he should be allowed to speak, and he has a right to speak without any putting a negative tone on anything he says. You might not agree with him, but he is allowed to speak on those items, and he was referring specifically to Appendix B, which is part of the report in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knowles. It is actually the chairman's prerogative to allow a non-member to speak, and I did allow Councillor Baxter to actually speak.
I appreciate that, Chair.
We'll move on then to the recommendations to the decision makers, 1, 2 and 3 on page 31. I will move these recommendations from the chair. Have I a seconder?
Yeah, I'm pleased to support that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. We'll now go to the vote. Is there anybody that doesn't agree with the recommendations on the committee that would like to intimate in the chat box? Right, there are no indications, so I assume that this is carried unanimously. We'll now go on to agenda item 10, which I think is the updated, where are we? We'll find the right page, the updated work plan. You will note that since the last meeting, we've called a meeting for the 4th of February, an extra meeting, and that which we talked about earlier today about the strategic risk register is already shown on that work programme. Are there any comments that you'd like? Councillor Wood.
Well, it's just that we obviously you withdrew the planning review. So could we put that on for on the work programme for the next meeting?
Well, the 4th of February.
Yeah.
I see no reason why not. I'm sure that planning will have had a good go at it by then, and
Well,
it
that's
could come back to us.
Yeah, that's what I thought, Mr. Chairman. I thought it's essential that I think it's essentially just come back to us, really. Thank you.
I have no objection. Item 11, I've got no further business that needs to be talked about at this time, and I will declare this meeting closed, and the recording can be closed down for now. And thank you all for your attendance, and I wish you all a happy Christmas and a good New Year next year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bye, everybody.
Can someone stop the recording, please?
I think it's Jordan doing the recording. Bear with.
Thank you, Jordan.
Hang on. I don't know what happens if you end the meeting without the recording being done. Don't know where she's gone. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to leave now, though. Are you there, Jordan?